Hey guys, Paul here from FamilyWheels.ca. Thanks for tuning in to another car review for your growing family. Today I've decided to take a little bit of a camping trip with my buddy Jay, and we did a little bit of off-roading as well to get to where we wanted to go camping. It meant that it was the perfect time to give the new Fiat 500X a run for its money. This is Fiat's brand new version of their 500 series, which is selling in over 100 countries now. And it's a more beefed up four-door version that's meant to handle a little bit of off-roading as well. So perfect chance to see how this car does on those off-road backcountry trails in British Columbia. This is supposed to take a slice of the pie from the likes of the Subaru XV, the Nissan Juke, the Mini Countryman, which I think this looks a lot like actually, even the Jeep Renegade. Now, since Fiat and Chrysler and Jeep are all under the same umbrella now, this actually shares a lot of the same underpinnings as the Jeep Renegade. Same chassis, even the same engine, although this is supposed to be a little bit sportier. And it is made in Italy as well. Now, I took a traditional 500 hatchback through the windy country roads of Tuscany with my wife a few years ago on our honeymoon, and I fell in love with that car. It was the little diesel, so not available here, but it was such a riot, so much fun, and I was curious to see if the bit of extra ground clearance, the larger wheelbase, the heavier body altogether would take away some of that fun, and that's what we're going to check and see what this car does today here, both off-road and in city day-to-day life as well. So stick around, we're going to see how the new 500X stacks up. I always see a side view back. So right off the hop, I have to say that I think finding a middle ground for a vehicle that would be good off-road but also excel in day-to-day driving can be a bit of a hard thing to find. The whole name sport utility is often a bit of a misnomer, because if it's a good off-road car, then it's going to be really soft and sloppy around city streets, or if it is more city tuned, then once you get it off-road it feels really stiff and rough for the ride. Fiat has really nailed it here, in my opinion. Whether it was on, windy, paved mountain highways in British Columbia, or getting into those potholes and ruts, even some creek crossings when we got off-road, this car felt at home all the way along, and I'm really impressed by that. You can get two engines with this car, the same engines that you can get as options in the Jeep Renegade. First up is a 1.4 liter turbo, and second is what we have here today, a 2.4 liter, what Fiat Chrysler calls Tiger Shark engine, one of the best names around in my opinion. And that's the same engine that you're going to find in the likes of the Chrysler 200, the Dodge Dart, the Jeep Renegade, and of course here with the 500X. Now, one of the things that got me really excited about that little 500 that we were driving through the back streets of Europe on our honeymoon was just how fuel efficient that car was. It was, the fun factor to fuel efficiency was unlike anything I've ever seen. It was such a riot, yet it was a diesel and we were getting about 4.5 liters per 100 kilometers. So I had high hopes for fuel efficiency with this car, and obviously it's not going to match up, but this is still on the high end of what you would expect for a car of this size with an engine of that size. We're getting about 8.5 liters per 100 kilometers on a mix of city driving, that bit of off-roading, but primarily highway driving, and that's about 500k worth of driving from us in the last week. Now, one thing you do get with that Tiger Shark engine is a 9-speed automatic gearbox, and while that certainly helps with fuel efficiency, one thing I found is that when it does pop into that 9th and final gear on highways, that it's revving so low that the car kind of shudders along and feels like it wants to stall out a bit, and that's a little bit disconcerting to me. All right, let's take a walk around the various seats in this car and see how they each stack up. First up, the driver's seat, and I do like the taller, more commanding view in this car because of that extra ground clearance. It means that you're a lot higher up than a typical hatchback, and you get a nice view of the road. The seats are relatively comfortable, not the most comfortable I've ever been in, but not bad. still have a fair bit of support in them. And this is the trekking line that I'm in here today. So not the highest level trim. There are 5 trims available to you, but this is still about a $30,000 car at its base when you get the trekking line. But you start adding things like the convenience package that's in here today, dual zone climate control, an improved sound system, and all of a sudden you start adding taxes on top of that too, and this is about a $40,000 car. So it's not cheap, but its finishes don't feel cheap either. It doesn't feel like I'm sitting in a tin can here. One thing that I do find a little bit weird is the fact that this is a more off-road oriented car, but all-wheel drive is an option that you have to pay a couple of $1,000s extra for. Why do that? Why not make it like Subarus, where it's across the board with the 500X, all of them are going to be all-wheel drive? I don't think I would come across anyone who'd buy this car and just opt for the front-wheel drive option. Another thing that's weird is this electric e-brake. Every time I put the car into park, this automatically activates, and it means that, you know, sometimes if I'm just, you know, putting it in park for a second and about to drive off again, I have to remember to deactivate that e-brake. There were a couple of times where I went to pull away, the car's really laboring, I'm wondering what's going on, and that's the case. But for the most part, this interior is simple, it's intuitive, it's nicely laid out, and it doesn't feel cheap and chintzy. Now, one of the things when it comes to these smaller crossovers that I do find, you know, is a serious Achilles heel is the back seat. You just don't have much room. I'm afraid that is the case here with the 500X as well. I've set my driver's seat the way I like it. I'm 6'2". And check it out, I am tight back here. You wouldn't have anyone beyond a young kid sitting in here very comfortably for more than a quick drive around town. Not much headroom in here for me either. When it comes to the rear trunk test, I was actually pretty surprised by this. It looks good. We've got our standard amount of gear, stroller, a couple bags of groceries, a diaper bag, a ball, and a backpack, and it filled it up, but I've still got a little bit of room to spare. Not bad. Moving on to the next passenger seat over here, I've put our rear-facing child seat in place, and the downside on these cars as well is that that's going to affect legroom for the front passenger, and sure enough, we've got just over 9 inches of legroom when that rear-facing child seat's in place. Oh, and it's tight and not really safe either. This is certainly not what would be recommended when it comes to airbag deployment. I'd have that going off right in my face. But speaking of safety, this car does have a top safety pick plus rating from the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety, so that's something that's good to consider with your family with this car. Finally, let's look at our yogurt test, because I think these seats look really cool. They're this porous fabric on the trekking line. You can also get leather, but that's going to be a rather soft, supple leather that I think would scratch up quite easily. And there are those hundreds of tiny perforations that you're seeing in some of high-end cars that would be really hard to clean up because they clog up with all that stuff as well. But this stuff I don't think is going to do very well in terms of cleaning up messes that your kids leave behind. Let's take a look. Here's some yogurt, rubbing it in, and yeah, just as I thought, you can see it's really holding on to it. I mean, this is almost like a terry cloth, right? And it looks cool, but I just don't think that that's going to stack up for families very well. So you definitely want to lay something down on the back seat if you've got a kid back there who's still throwing food around. So I'm here with my pal Jay, and we've just spent a couple of days in this car, so we've had a pretty good chance to get a feel for it. And you've got a Subaru XV, which is kind of in the same realm as this 500X. You know, as someone who's got a car like this and uses it as a daily driver, really, I mean, in terms of size, they're very similar. Mm-hmm. For a family car, for daily life, how do you find the XV stacks up for you?
I find it's a little tight.
Yeah?
Yeah, with just like throwing a stroller in the back, then you're pretty much maxed out. Like, you can't throw anything else in the back then. And
you've got your dog and you've got a kid. And
exactly, yeah. So even with the stroller, we have to fold down 1/3 of the back seat, and that leaves, like, you know, 2/3 of a back seat for, yeah, a dog and a rear-facing baby seat.
Oh yeah, that gets tight pretty fast for sure. So do you, in retrospect, would you have gone with a vehicle of this size, or do you feel like you do just need that little bit more space for family living?
I feel like we need a little bit more space. Some people might make a smaller compact car work, but for our life, we need something a little bit bigger, I feel.
But in terms of, I mean, here we are going through all these potholes. It's still a little bit rough here. Yeah. In terms of a car for, you know, getting off the road and having a little bit of fun getting off to where we were going camping.
Yeah, it's been great. It's handled pretty beautiful with all the crevasses and gullies and stuff that we've traversed with this thing. It's held up and it's got through everything.
So here I am once again, very conflicted with a small crossover vehicle in our test, because on one hand, it's just really tight in the back seat. If you've got family back there for any period of time, they're gonna feel scrunched, and the trunk is gonna max out pretty quickly too in terms of its capacity. But it does have a top safety rating from the IIHS, the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety, so you will be driving in comfort and safely for that matter, and it's just a really fun car. So if you're the kind of person who's going to be maybe driving their family around in this from time to time, and you've got a larger secondary vehicle that you can use for driving around all the hockey gear and carpooling and that sort of thing, this could certainly be an option worth looking at, because I think that in terms of the competition, the Mini Countryman, the Subaru XV, we've got a seriously new contender here with the 500X.